The bear was still about 15-20 feet away, but it had started to make slow paces towards Rose, towards the large blossom emanating from her back. Small groans or growls of what seemed like curiosity or bewilderment, as if the animal didn't know what to make of it, but was intrigued by it nonetheless. As it took one lumbering step after another towards Rose, still very slowly, wondering what exactly it was seeing. There, in the center of Rose's flower, was a yellow center, a fluffy yellow center that suddenly began to produce tiny little specks of glowing yellow light that began to drift away, floating off into the air, filling the area with golden speckles of light. This too the bear seemed to think was astonishing, glancing out at the speckles as they floated about, like dots of pollen drifting in the air, each one a tiny little firefly all its own, all of it drawing attention still towards that glowing golden center that seemed to produce them. The bear stopped for a moment, sniffing the air, and as it did, Rose began to notice it as well. A scent, a very sweet scent, like fruit, like something tasty, like a fresh cut melon, all as those vibrant red petals continued to ebb and flow, ever so slightly shifting one way and then the next, the colorful red pattern alighting the area, the movement almost hypnotic as the bear continued to grow closer, sniffing more and more as it gained distance, shortening it again with each step until it was right there, standing right behind Rose, no more than a step or so away, gazing into her petals, to the glowing golden core, sniffing heavily, beginning to rub its nose against the core of her flower, which tickled Rose somewhat. It was at that point that something happened, without Rose even thinking about it, realizing it, without any concentration or effort, as if it was done on reflex. Rose's vines sprang forward rapidly, and in a single instant, ensnared the massive bear. For a moment it tried to pull away, starting to drag backwards away from Rose, but it couldn't, and that's when Rose noticed that she had dug her nails into the ground, burying them deep into the dirt and soil, and was gripping very firmly. She could feel the tension of this massive creature trying to pull away, and yet she was not flinching. She was unmoving to the amount of force that it was applying. It all happened in an instant, so fast that Rose felt startled by it herself. Suddenly, the invisibility faded away, revealing Rose in her full form and state, as the red glow of her petals grew brighter, no longer a shifting red pattern, but an intense red glow, steady, strong, intensifying, as the bear continued to struggle, pulling backwards, trying to pull itself away from Rose, until it stopped. It simply stopped struggling. As Rose looked back at it, the creature suddenly looked tame almost. It simply sat there, breathing, no longer trying to pull away, no longer trying to do anything. It seemed to just stand there. As Rose looked closely, she could see the thorns protruding from the vines and began to hear an ever so subtle sound, a dripping sound, as if some bit of water was touching the ground over and over again as she saw liquid flowing down her vines. The toxin, Rose thought. I guess it's the toxin that my nails make. It's in my vines too? She thought to herself curiously, seeing that the bear had completely stopped struggling, stopped doing anything at all. It wasn't as if the bear was frozen or paralyzed. It still looked like it could move. It simply didn't. It stood there, breathing, looking down at the ground, letting out small growls or groans here or there. What was going on, Rose thought. Is that what my toxin does? What is my toxin doing? But before she could try to come to any conclusion about that, she felt a strong pulling sensation, but not from the bear. It was coming from Rose. It was her vines pulling the bear, and as it did, the bear simply seemed to go along with it, stepping gently in her direction, like it was sleepwalking towards Rose's flower, being gently guided in by the vines, before the vines lifted the bear altogether, its paws no longer pressing against the ground. Rose could actually feel the weight of the bear as she lifted it, nearly a ton of animal, and yet it didn't really feel that difficult. Certainly there was tension. Rose could feel the weight, but it didn't feel extreme or overwhelming. All the while, the petals of Rose's flower began to widen, spreading out, seeming to get larger, wider, and in a single sweeping motion, a rapid pull from the vines, an ensnaring lunge from her petals. The entire bear was swallowed up, her flowers, the petals, wrapping around it, consuming it into the bulb, the vines then wrapping around the petals on the outside, seeming to release the bear within it, before tightening their grasp on the bulb, now nearly 12 foot large in every direction, to encompass the massive form of this bear. There the vines gripped it. The glow of her bulb intensified. Rose could see the bear inside of the bulb, moving ever so gradually. She could feel it and see it. And in that instant, Rose began to feel her mouth watering, the growl in her stomach lighting up again. And as she did, she felt something else, like a jolting sensation extending out into her back, into the bulb, as she saw what looked like liquid, some sort of liquid that she couldn't identify, filling the bulb, the bear now swimming in it. At that moment, pulsations began to start flowing, one after another, the light of the bulb dimming and then increasing massively, becoming more rapid with every passing second, like the beat of a drum that just kept getting faster, before it obtained a solid state of glow, a hum. And within the bulb she could see the bear, as its outline seemed to change. No, not change, dissipate, seeing the shadow of the bear within the bulb dissolve away into nothing in a matter of moments. All that was left was the liquid, the shadow of the bear completely gone. Rose suddenly felt her vines clench tightly, squeezing the bulb. It felt like with every bit of force they could muster, and as they did, the bulb shrank down, compacting in rapidly, and Rose felt a surge, an overwhelming surge of warmth and heat and energy. like she was suddenly overflowing with energy, the kind that makes you want to run in circles for no other reason than to do it. And suddenly, her hunger began to subside ever so gradually. Rose breathed deeply and felt a deep sense of satisfaction as her petals began to unfurl, the vines releasing the wrap that they had around them, retracting back into Rose's bulb as the petals spread what looked like surges, jolts of green electricity and red electricity, bouncing between the petals as they unfurled, widening back to their normal state, shrinking back down and becoming more demure, flowery and pretty. And just like that, it was over. Rose stood up from her crouched position, and the only thing that was going through her mind was, what in the world was that?